The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us for this live reading by author J.E. Mayer, otherwise known as Dr. John Mayer. I'm Mallory Richards, your host for this event. Please note that all participants are still in listen-only mode, so if you have a question for Dr. Mayer, please send it to us via the notes panel, where we'll ask the author as part of the Q&A session after the readings. John, how are you this evening?
I'm great, Mallory. Thanks for hosting this event for me.
You're most welcome, and I am excited to be a part of this webinar. For those of you who are new fans, Dr. Mayer is a practicing clinical psychologist who treats adolescents, children, families, violent and acting out teens, substance abusers, and disorders of young adults. As a native Chicagoan, he received his doctorate from Northwestern University Medical School. Dr. Mayer is the author of over 60 professional articles, mostly on family life, 20 books, a screenplay, and a stage play. He received a contract on his first novel, entitled Shadow Warrior, to be developed into a major motion picture. His newsletter, Mayer's Memo, is widely acclaimed for its hard-hitting guidance on the most important topics for youth. Mayer's Memo is in its 27th year, and it is distributed to schools, institutions, and parents from coast to coast. Dr. Mayer also lectures and consults around the country, as well as to the federal and local law enforcement agencies. And of course, if that weren't enough, Dr. Mayer is also a visiting professor at the University of Nuevo León in Monterrey, Mexico. Tonight, John will share with us some of his favorite excerpts from one of his newest novels, Immortal, the First Tango. In a nutshell, Immortal, the First Tango is a romantic suspense set in the present day. Octavius Kalman is a wealthy international wine tycoon who relives his 400 years, yes, I said it, 400 years of life as a reluctant pawn in many historical events while in conflict with a mortal enemy. Coping with the disease, porphyria, responsible for the vampire legends, and in sorrow of his lost true love, she unexpectedly re-enters Octavius's life again. Or does she? Along his dramatic journey, Octavius is saved by his love of music and dance, becoming a key figure in the development of tango from the seaboards of Europe and South America over 150 years ago to its sensual presence in society today. John, I've been wanting to ask you a question of my own. What compelled you to write this book?
Well, Mallory, like many people, I've been a fan of the vampire movies and books and legend all my life since a little boy. Then, having gone to medical school and also in my practice keeping up with the latest research, I was fascinated how new discoveries in genetics and blood chemistry really make the vampire a possibility. And then, of course, I was introduced to a performance of the tango some years ago, and it's absolutely spellbinding in its romanticism, sensuality, and how it tells a story in a short period of time.
Excellent, thanks. Before Dr. Mayer reads for us, I want to reiterate that questions can be sent to us via the notes or the question panel on the webinar, and we'll do our best to answer all the questions after the live readings. At the end, we'll also do a shout out to our very first registrant who won the $25 Amazon gift card. So without further ado, let's get going.
Thanks for that awesome intro, Mallory. Let's start with a scene. Now, this is from chapter 1, and this really introduces the virus that is responsible for vampirism in our hero, Octavius. The virus inhabiting Kalman's body never died and didn't allow its host to die. Generations of mutation ensured the survival of the virus by protecting its host. Kalman's own research into his condition had revealed that cellular regeneration and mutation are common in the human body. Many organisms, such as the skin, the liver, kidneys, can regenerate damaged tissue. It's not scientifically remarkable that parts of the human body could regenerate themselves time and time again. In this regard, humans were no different than other species. The body's largest organ, the skin, accomplishes this feat on a daily basis. It would take just a tweak in the structure of the DNA to spread this regenerative ability into the entire organism. The virus in Kalman's body provided just that tweak, changing the molecular structure of every cell, enabling it to regenerate. It was then in the best interest of the virus to protect its host, the human, at all costs. Evolved over centuries, the virus created a protection so complete that it empowered its human host with attributes that distinguished him from other humans. He was, in essence, a human fortress in which this virus survived. Most people would envy the side effects: great strength, good looks, hypersensitivity, high intelligence, and intuitiveness that bordered on clairvoyance, and irresistible sex appeal among them. When he first studied his disease, Kalman doubted that all his unusual gifts were a result of the virus's alteration of his body. Then his research took him into the social sciences and learned how all social and interpersonal skills had evolved to serve a single purpose: human survival. Why else would humans have adorned themselves with all manner of illogical wardrobe but to advance their survival? Attractiveness, chivalry, insight, empathy, and intelligence weren't just pleasant human attributes. They served to protect the organism, no different than the most mysterious appendage on some tiny creature on the ocean floor. These uniquely human characteristics, worthless to other species, were part of the blueprint of the human evolution and best understood in that context. The virus accelerated that evolution for no other reason than to survive. Kalman had come to understand that fact not as something amazing, but as organic science. The human host must be invincible in every way possible, or the virus would perish. This rare disease followed the laws of basic genetics. Kalman understood his disease, both the endowments and the captivity it bequeathed him. When women encountered Kalman, the virus's gifts overwhelmed their feminine instincts. Not for the purposes of mating, the virus didn't spread by such conventional means, but for the virus's own survival. As long as its male hosts would evoke unquestioned adoration in women, the virus would be safe. A woman's attraction to Kalman had at its foundation a primitive, mindless genetic instinct, not the old black magic, a love potion, or something as brittle as charm. Kalman's condition was always foremost in his thoughts, not because he was inclined to brood, but because his every contact with reality involved the virus. Every conscious thought and action served as a reminder of its effects.
Wow. Okay, you had me at great strength and good looks. That's really quite a tale that's unfolding here, weaving together science and romance and, the incredible power of the virus. I'm intrigued already. So where are we going to go next, John?
Well, keep in mind, I've promised everyone this is a very compelling romance as well. So let's get a little taste of the romance in the book. I'll let the full romance to the readers, but let's talk about the romance between Kalman, Octavius Kalman, and his long-lost love. And this comes from chapter 5. Mira now suspected that this man who kept appearing in her life was coming to her for a reason and might be someone special to her. She had not given him the chance to explain who he was or what he wanted. Reading the journal again had been an epiphany. Her aunt described this tango move, and this man, this Kalman, had performed it just as she described. Mira thought how stupid she had been to cast him away at the Malanga and then leave right after his tango. She began to fret. Had he done that dance as a message to her? She'd been profoundly affected by his expertise at the tango, but at the time she couldn't quite say what had unsettled her. It was days before she remembered the entries in her aunt's journal. She'd thought about that journal so often throughout her life, and spent so many hours of her childhood reading and rereading it. But it wasn't until she was back in her trailer, her little home, that the memories flooded back. And then there was that move. She had been involved with tango her entire life and had seen the masters dance, and none of them had executed that move. She heard legends about a male dancer long ago who could levitate during the tango. There were even daguerreotypes and silent movies of him with both feet fully off the floor as he danced. The images were so old and so poorly preserved that she always assumed that they were a fake. But that night, he made it all true. There was a dancer who could perform such a move. He had sent her a message, and she wasted her chance to engage. Who is he? She thought. Why, no. How does he know about me? And why would that move in my aunt's ancient journal be there? Why is he trying to reach me? He's not going to contact me again. I told him to go away, and he will. Oh, stupid. A voice inside Mira compelled her to find this mystery man. Yet she faced insurmountable obstacles, not the least of which was the fact that Cirque was packing up in 2 days, moving from Chicago to the next city.
Wow. Okay, so we're led to believe this might be his lost true love, but we don't really know, do we?
No, well, as we authors say, you have to read the book to find out.
Okay, so the book also promotes and talks about a historical element. So take us back in time. Tell us something about Kalman from, a century ago.
Well, I will, and it's chock full of history and all thoroughly researched history. We have an excerpt on the possibility of Jack the Ripper being a vampire.
Really?
We have, the killing of the Archduke that started World War I, and Kalman possibly being there, and others, really.
So this guy really got around.
Well, you live 400 years, you're bound to see some things. And we forget in those days there's less population, especially in Europe, and it was a much smaller community. So he may have been there for these events.
Wow. Okay, take us there.
Well, this is a little bit of history that I just took great pleasure in researching and putting in the book. And well, it's about the history of the violin, which is really not that old of an instrument. Here we go. I took a seat with the other musicians, who greeted me enthusiastically, eager to hear this new instrument. Most of them have never heard the violin before, let alone this new generation of Amati invention. There existed no such thing in those days as a musical arrangement. So when I was ready, I simply began to play, and the other instruments blended into the background. My fellow musicians were brilliant. They played so subtly, letting the sound of each violin dominate. My performance stood up as my triumph. It also became my tragedy. The crowd listened in complete silence, captivated by the new music. The strains of my violin seemed to evoke emotions in people otherwise hidden. There were tears among the men as well as the women while I played. The violin opened their hearts like a surgical knife. I felt such a connection to that audience. I played 3 songs, and then, as I began the 4th, a man began to dance alone in front of the orchestra. Now, normally, one would assume that such a man was a bit daft, but this man's manner was elegant, refined. He performed his dance aristocratically, full of confidence and strength. I watched as he played. Others watched him as well, even as they emoted to the sounds of the violin. His dance seemed in harmony with my music. After a while, a woman who had been watching this dancer closely came forward and presented herself as a partner for him. He accepted, and they began to dance together. Their movements vacillated between pauses, Smooth glides across the dance floor, intimate embraces, and twirling legs intertwined with each other. They look serious and determined, yet you could also see an intense emotional connection between them. Nowadays, it would be like watching a live XXX rated movie right in front of you. No one had seen anything like this before. Some people were shocked. They thought it was way too sexual. I thought it was fantastic, spellbinding.
Wow. Okay. All right, let's slingshot again. For your last reading, why don't you share something with us current day? Bring us back to present day and maybe even tell us a little bit about how a vampire goes about drinking blood or, I don't know, getting his satisfaction in current day.
That sounds great, Mallory. And this is a vampire book, so the vampire has to feed. So this is from chapter 18.
I don't know whether that's cool or gross, but I guess I'm going to find out.
Yeah, I think each reader can be the judge of that, correct? Again, from chapter 18. Feeding the virus in New York City had its upside and its downside. The city had such a variety of misfits, kooks, and extremists that securing blood could be easy in an emergency. In New York and any American city, several of his traditional methods of securing blood fell under such scrutiny that he didn't bother using them. But if you were imaginative, there are plenty of sources, usually found on the edges of society. During one visit to New York City, he attended a gathering of self-proclaimed vampires. They called themselves the Nosferatu, and they met at midnight in the back room of a nightclub on the west side of Manhattan. On any given night, the front of the club was indie music, European techno, or goth. The decor of the back room fit the theme of the coven, as the Nosferatu called their gatherings. The only colors in the room were black and gold. There were mirrors on the walls and maroon microfiber sofas lining the room, with matching round stools scattered all around. The room was candlelit only. The Nosferatu admitted Kalman to the back room for a guest fee, after his lengthy email exchange with Vincent, the group's leader. When Kalman arrived, he scanned the members of the coven. They dressed in all goth-like, black, many piercings, spiked hair, fishnet stockings and gloves, deep red lipstick and gold jewelry. They sat in ritualistic circles, made thin surface cuts on each other with razor blades, and then licked the blood off. There was a great deal of touching and kissing among the group. Male, female, male, male, female, female. The touching was indiscriminate, but not necessarily sexual, even though some of the tiny cuts were made on thighs and breasts. The taste of the blood alone had an orgasmic effect on them all. The act of doing something so feral seemed to give them a sexual excitement more satisfying than sex itself. So the physical contact didn't go beyond fondling or kissing, but the fondling became quite intimate and intense among them. Kalman appeared to be the oldest person in the room, making him the subject of great curiosity. He diplomatically repelled several intimate advances. Instead, he focused on a young woman who appeared more reserved than the rest. She sat detached from three others in a small area made up of high-backed cushioned chairs and a love seat. Kalman's attentions snapped toward her when her companions left her alone on the maroon love seat. "May I?" Kalman asked as he pointed at the empty space next to her. She lowered her head and blinked slowly in response. She wore a tight black dress, unremarkable from any of the others in the club, but her appearance didn't go to the extremes of most of the other women there. She had no face piercings. Her shoulder-length hair was styled more conservatively, and her long legs were bare, not in the ubiquitous fishnets of the evening. He sat close to her, stroking her lightly and chatting, his conversation gauged to appeal to the nuances of her personality. "You seem new to this scene," he asked as the back of his hand stroked her shoulder, his voice strong yet gentle. "Yes, first time, in fact." Her body welcoming his touch. "Mine as well." Each of his statements paced slow and reserved, as if the words themselves waited for her reaction. "And what are your feelings about all of this?" he asked. "It's very stimulating, exciting." She took a deep breath. "It's more arousing than I thought it would be, isn't it?" His hand now gently on her neck and the back of her head, her dark hair falling between his fingers, his index finger concentrating on the soft nape of her neck. With her head arching backwards at his touch, he knew she was receptive to his advances. When his attention had fueled the moment properly, he remarked, "It looks so sensual. I imagine it's even more so if we participate." He waited. She didn't speak, but she turned her head to face him, and the small smile gave him all he needed to know. He pressed his cheek to hers and whispered, "Let me try it with you." Her whole back arched at his request, and she gasped an excited short breath. She was his. She had no idea that his need for sustenance was actually real and not the juvenile thrill that the rest of the group was seeking. He gently pricked one of her veins with a stainless steel rod he had specially made. The instrument resembled a double-edged scalpel, and it came to a microscopic point. He kept it in a container that resembled a Mont Blanc Chopin pen. Once he opened her vein, he sucked her blood aggressively, trying to get the pint his virus demanded. The Nosferatu noticed his enthusiasm immediately, seeing a reality they had only toyed with at a safe distance. They reacted with fear and alarm. Vincent approached the love seat just as Coleman had his full. "Excuse me, friend, but your technique here is a bit out of bounds for us. No hurting, man." The girl smiled up at Vincent from her seat. Her eyes almost closed from the sensation, the loss of blood, or both. "I'm fine," she breathlessly offered, the words coming with some effort. An irritated Vincent demanded, "I'm still going to have to ask you to leave. You're disturbing the others." Kalman smiled at his hypocrisy, stood, kissed the young woman on the neck where he had just fed. As he left, he heard more angry banter from the group and expressions of disgust. He smiled again at both their naive duplicity and his own accomplishment of having filled his need.
Wow. Okay, well, I think that was a grand last reading for this webinar. Thank you so much, John. I think we're going to move on now to the questions. We have some awesome questions coming in. So let me just take a peek at what we've got here. Okay, you kind of addressed this before, but Bob is asking, how historically accurate are the violin and tango references? Maybe you want to elaborate on that just a little bit?
They're absolutely spot on. The Amati family invented the violin in the 1600s, and of course, in my story, Kalman was not only still around there, that's when he was before his vampire days. And
he was young.
He was young. He was a young man, and if you read the story, his family traded with the Amati family from Italy, their Hungarian wines.
Wow. And the tango?
Oh, the tango. Absolutely. The tango's history is quite amazing because it really grew out of a really compilation of cultures. And so you'll have to read the book, but Kalman has a taste of all those cultures as he travels around the world.
He is quite the man.
He is. He's an interesting character.
He is truly continental. Okay. Our next question comes from Beth, and this is a very interesting question. Can Octavius have children while still having the virus?
I don't know. That's a good question. Maybe that will be in book 2 of Octavius Coleman's adventures. I haven't really thought that far ahead.
Well, that's great. Well, that actually answers Brian's question. He said, will there be a sequel to Immortal? So that's great. Good news. Okay, question 3 is from Maureen, and she asks, I know porphyria is a real disorder, but how prevalent is it today, and how is it actually treated?
Well, it's an extremely rare disease, and it's not necessarily life-threatening itself, but of course the symptoms of it can be life-threatening. The fascinating thing for me is how closely it aligns to some of the characteristics of the vampire as we've had in literature.
Sure.
These individuals are photosensitive, so they're very affected by sunlight and light in general. Their skin reacts to it and it hurts. And so it's a rare disease, but it's real. People have it. And so many of the characteristics are similar to vampirism, including, and I want to get this out, is that it's been shown in the medical literature that actually ingesting blood helps people feel less pain and less of the symptoms of this disease.
Wow. Okay, so very real. Very rare, but very real.
Exactly.
Interesting. Okay. Okay, this is more of a comment, I think, than a question, but it's great. It's from Katie. She says, bravo. Thanks for writing a vampire novel for adults. I thought I was over, and I'm using my air quotes, over the vampire trend, but this book goes where none of the others have gone. So, bravo, John.
Well, even though it's just a comment, I'm going to add on an answer. And first of all, thank you so much. And I felt the same way. Again, as I said, I've been a fan of the vampire stories for a long time, and I longed myself for an adult vampire story. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. Tying into that, an additional comment, and then we'll close this section, is from Suzanne. She said, wow, this book gets racy. I love it. So I guess you've got a fan for the romance piece of the novel.
It's a pretty strong romance, Mallory.
That's great. Okay. Well, thank you so much for offering this live webinar reading. I know I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Mallory. Time has really flown.
Indeed. So why don't we wrap up, and why don't you tell us where folks can learn more about Immortal, The First Tango, as well as, all of your other novels, including Shadow Warrior and another novel that I know you also had published this year, by the way, 2 books in 1 year. Good job. This newest novel is called An Anger at Birth, but I think we can learn about all of your books in one place. Is that right?
Exactly. Excerpts, book trailers, and where to buy information for all my books is available at my author's website, found at jemeyerbooks.com. Let me repeat that. That's jemeyerbooks.com. So really, I recommend everyone check out the website, but particularly I'm very proud of the video book trailers that I had made from Red 14 Films in Hollywood. And they capture the books extremely well. It's really a great way to get a sense of the book's tension and drama. And look forward to the release of An Anger at Birth. In fact, it's already out, and you can look that up as well. But we're going to do a reading in January on An Anger at Birth, and it's an exciting thriller about really a disturbed teenager who is a very dangerous character. I think you'll like it.
Wow, breaking news. So another webinar. How exciting.
Well, we aim to please. Thank you, Mallory.
Okay, great. Well, thanks, John. Before we say goodnight, I'd like to congratulate Brad H., who's our winner tonight of the $25 Amazon gift card. And I'd like to say thanks to everyone who joined us this evening for a little virtual FaceTime with author J.E. Mayer. You all had great questions and comments. We appreciated that. So good night and happy holidays to all.